hunker down in the Eastern Mediterranean. We are looking at houses, yes. Um, we are in the later part of the first millennium BCE, centuries, starting with the fifth and the fourth up at Olympus, third, second down here on Delos, second and first centuries BCE at Tel Anafah, which is in modern day northern Israel, and you see here a view of the site. And here, excavators have found a large villa, 38 meters square, with a central courtyard and columns on at least two sides. You see those columns sticking up here. A central courtyard with columns evokes what style of house? A peristyle courtyard house? Is that what you're going to say? That would be correct. And where have we seen peristyle courtyard houses first? No. Whoa. No, we have not. We have seen houses with courtyards at Olympus, yes. But at Olympus, the courtyards are not colonnaded. There are no columns around the courtyards. Just backing up, this is Tel Anafah, Anafa, in modern day northern Israel. Delos, yes. It's labeled, yeah, but it's a little hard to see. That's true, and he's all in. Yes, on Delos. So at Olympus, the courtyards are workaday parts of the house. At Delos, the courtyard becomes a very elaborated part of the house for public display. Think about the difference in American house styles from I don't know, little 1930s bungalow to a McMansion, and you will imagine moving in style from Olympus to Delos. The Tel Anafah house has this interior courtyard with decorated walls, similar again to Delos, where the walls were painted in flat colored panel paintings, and there were mosaic floors here, like on Delos, in some of the rooms, not in the central courtyard, though. The central courtyard of the Anafah house did not have a mosaic, but in some of the side rooms there were, including the rooms that were on this side of the courtyard, which were a bath complex, a two-room, kind of luxurious private bath complex, the likes of which you did not see in the fancy houses on Delos. What did they eat? How would we know? Here's how we would know. We find the cooking vessels. Now you're going to figure it out. These are the two main sorts of cooking vessels found at Tel Anafah. These sorts of vessels here on the top, these sorts of vessels here on the bottom. Discuss with your neighbor these sorts of meals. I don't know, fellas, if you're anything like my 19-year-old son, you might not really have a good idea about what you might cook in these various vessels. Why? Because it's deep and the top is. It would be easier to pour things in, pour things out because the upper opening is narrower. And what else would a narrower upper opening be suitable for? You could hold them over fire. They're charred on the bottom. They were placed directly on the fire. So all of those observations are good. It's deep. It's wide here. It's narrower here, which makes it easier to pour it out of. But there's another factor to having it have a smaller opening at the top. Does anybody in here cook? Less evaporation. Is that what you were going to say? Yes, that is so right. Oh, that is very good. Indeed, less evaporation. That is correct. So vessels like this, which we in the trade call cooking pots, would be better for soups or bean dishes, things that you need to cook for a long time. You need a capacious amount of vessel to hold it all in, and you don't really want too much water to evaporate. It's a little easier to put over the top. What about the vessels on the bottom? What do you think? Like a mini casserole. In fact, you know that what archaeologists call these casseroles. Yes, we do. Why? What are the features that suggest a? What do you mean by casserole? You can put layers of things in it, but not too many. The opening is as wide as the rest of the body. So you could make soup in it, but it's less useful for that. It's easier to manipulate larger things that you would put inside. And so they are two different kinds of dishes, different kinds of vessels that you would use for two different sorts of food. Now, as it happens, these kinds of vessels, the cooking pots, they are the sort of cooking vessel that has been traditional in this region for 2,000 years. The shape changes a little bit, some of the aspects of the style, but basically a vessel that's deep with a sort of globular body and the opening is narrower than the vessel itself. That is a cooking pot. It's good for soups and bean dishes. Casseroles are more like this sort of vessel. You saw this set of images when we talked about Olympus. These are the sorts of cooking vessels that are found regularly in Greek sites. Some of them are cooking pot types, but some of them are casseroles. In fact, casseroles were invented in Greece. They're a Greek style of cooking vessel. And what that must mean is that the sorts of dishes that you made in them come from uh, come from the Greek world. So these folks at Talanafa didn't buy their casseroles from the Greek world. These were made in the area around Talanafa. So that must mean that the people who lived there were knowledgeable about and wanted to make Greek style dishes for dinner sometimes. Almost all of the cooking vessels found at Talanafa are cooking pots and casseroles. About 1% of the vessels are this sort. All right, go back to it. What's this sort and what would you make in it? Chat. Chat, chat, chat. 1%. 14 examples as opposed to 2,000. Shallow, deep, very shallow. Here's a reconstruction of what it looks like. In fact, we call them pans. They don't have handles, though. They don't have handles.
I was just gonna say it's very sharp and very like wide, so it has a lot of surface area, so it can cook things fast. That's why I named it that way.
It has a lot of surface area, so it can cook things fast. It's shallow and it's very, very wide. What sorts of dishes would you make in a vessel like this? You could make bread. You hold on to that thought. You're gonna see something that's gonna make you smile a little bit later. Yep. Fish, because you would have a bigger space to cook them in, possibly.
Pies.
Pies. What else? What other sorts of dishes? Pies, fish. But so there's no handle, okay? So it's not impossible that this would be used the way that you're thinking of a frying pan today, but it's more likely that it would be put inside an oven. What other sorts of dishes do you make in something like this besides pie? If you put it inside an oven. Well, it's pretty shallow, so you would probably use a casserole for stew. Cake. I'm going to tell you an ancient recipe from an ancient recipe book that you made in a dish like this. Here's the recipe. It comes from a first century CE cooking book. You take some fish or meat or vegetables and you place them in the bottom of one of these vessels. I'll tell you the ancient name in a second. And then you mix up some eggs and milk and you pour it over the top and you bake it. Egg hot dish I got down here. Quiche? Yeah, something like that. These sorts of vessels in antiquity were called patinae, Patinae, and they come from Italy. The largest number of vessels like this are found in houses from Italy, like this one from Pompeii. And in fact, the examples from Tel Anafá were actually imported from Italy. They come from Italy. The people who lived there made their own casserole dishes, but they bought the pans. This must have been uh, some exotic new kind of dish that somebody who traveled from this site uh, discovered when they went abroad and decided that they liked so much that they bought some of the vessels to make it when they came back home because they knew that nobody who lived back at Tel Anafá had vessels like this. So these folks had Greek style stews and they had Italian style, well, maybe it's a quiche, although, technically speaking, I just have to say that without a bottom crust, you'll note that in the recipe there was no bottom crust. It would be a frittata. Just to get picky about it. All right. They also had really good wine to wash things down, which we know. A whole cache of large wine jars imported from Rhodes. The island of Rhodes were found at the site. How do we know where they come from? Because the handles of these vessels from Rhodes, these amphorae, were stamped. You can make out the stamps here, looking down at the tops of the handles. And the stamps regularly carry the names of the officials who oversaw the filling of the jars to make sure that they had the right amount of wine inside them, that nobody was getting shorted, so that they had the proper capacity. So the people who lived in this villa ate and drank very, very well. Although they lived all the way over here on the far eastern side of the Mediterranean, they had Greek casseroles and Italian frittatas or quiches or pies, patinae, and Rhodian wine, all here. Who are they? They are, despite the fact that they import Italian dishes and borrow the style of Greek vessels and drink Greek wine, they are almost certainly not Italians and they are almost certainly not Greeks. They live in a zone that is on the edge of the territory of the ancient Phoenicians. The Phoenicians, whose modern day territory mostly is modern Lebanon, parts of northern Israel, were folk who have lived in this region for a couple of thousand years. And in this era, in the Hellenistic era, we can recognize them regularly still by not by their lifestyle exactly, because as we can see, their lifestyle is pretty cosmopolitan, pretty Mediterranean. But we can recognize them by some of the small signs that we find in their houses that that portray some aspects of their religious beliefs. And this is one of those signs. These sorts of small amulets depict in a schematic fashion one of the deities of the Phoenicians, a female deity named Tanit. And you see the symbol for Tanit. There's a circular circle for her head and little stick arms, and then a triangle for her body. And you see that same image here on a ceiling. That's something that would have come off of a signet ring and was impressed on a lump of clay that sealed a papyrus roll. This ceiling was found at a site very close to Tel Anafah, just up the road. And it has an inscription in Phoenician, in ancient Phoenician, and then the schematic drawing of Tanit. These amulets are also not from Tel Anafah. These were not actually found at Tel Anafah. They were found at one of the sites on the coast, one of the Phoenician sites on the coast. But these are the kinds of evidence that we interpret as the folks who had this had an interest in advertising their beliefs and who they were. Here's something kind of interesting. The Tanit image that you see here in the amulet occurs here in this foyer mosaic in a house on Delos. You can see looking through the foyer to the mosaic back here. So if you would walk into the house, you would see that the welcome mat, in effect, of this owner wanted you to know that he identified as a Phoenician. But when you would get into the courtyard of his house, this is what you would see. That wonderful dolphin race mosaic that took up the whole middle of the courtyard. This is the House of the Dolphins on Delos. If we didn't have that mosaic floor in the foyer, we would never in a million years think that the person who lived here was anything but Greek. But because we have it, we can see very vividly something which is a new reality in the Mediterranean by this time. And that is that these words that we've been using, Greek, Italian, Near Eastern, don't really mean as much as we have been probably imagining they mean. Instead, they're a kind of label, they're a kind of identity, but people felt free to have lots of identities. All right, let's go to Pompeii. Pompeii is one of the, if not the very best places to look at aspects of daily life in the past because of a terrible tragedy that took place at 10 a.m. on August 24th in the year 79 when Mount Vesuvius, which looms over the town, and you see it here on view behind the forum of the town, when Mount Vesuvius erupted. Over the next 8 hours of that day, the sky grew black and fires broke out throughout the town, and the mountain spewed what eventually settled as 5 meters of mud, 1 to 2 meters of tiny little airy-like pumice stones called lapilli, Lapilli, and then finally a couple meters of ash. AD, CE. Thank you. Excavators at Pompeii carve through all of those layers, and when they get all the way down, um, they get to the level of the streets and the houses and the public spaces, where many of the people of the town were killed as they were felled in their tracks as they tried to flee. Probably the longest running continuous excavation in the world. Pompeii's excavation began already in the 18th century, so it's been well over 200 years. And as a consequence, huge tracts of the town have been excavated, and we know a lot um, about the setup of the town. Here you see a plan of the town in its entirety, 160 acres, about 20,000 people, so actually a relatively small town, not very huge. There is an older part of town. The town actually was founded in the 6th century, and you can see, as in all towns that have an older part, the streets don't line up. That's the way it is in an old part of town. And so you see this section of the town here with the streets in a kind is perpendicular to one another, but not perpendicular to the way that the rest of the town lined up. A big forum, that's the one that you just saw in the image a little bit ago, with a temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus at one end of it, and public buildings stretched around. Yep. Oh, how can they tell which ones were brothels? Because because there are a lot of wall paintings in Pompeii, and in the brothels, the wall paintings are quite explicit. I will not be showing you any of those. So sorry. On the other hand, let me just tell you that it is very, very easy to, for any of you that are curious about this, just go to Wikimedia and type Pompeii brothels or Pompeii erotic paintings. There's a big folder. Yeah, it's not just the wall paintings, actually, it's the finds inside. All sorts of figurines and lots of stuff. Lots of stuff that makes it clear that what was on people's minds in those particular places. All right. Land use in Pompeii. We're back here in the forum. About 18% of the city of Pompeii was comprised of streets and public public places like the forum. About 14% of the city were shops. Only 3% of the land was given over to religious buildings, to temples. A comfortable 12% of the land in Pompeii was given over to entertainment facilities like this, the Great Theater, one of two theaters in Pompeii. There was the Great Theater, the Small Theater, and also an amphitheater for gladiatorial games. But the lion's share of the town, 45%, were houses. Here you see an aerial view showing you the Great Theater, what that you just saw. The Small Theater is right next to it, and then the acres and acres and acres devoted to the houses. Like Delos, houses have similarities, many similarities, but no two houses are identical. So let's look at some of the components of some of the typical components, the components that houses have in common. So I've highlighted here individual houses. Here's the entrance, the entrance, the entrance. The entryways to a house in Pompeii, or actually most Italian houses, is a long, narrow corridor that funnels you into a central space. In that open corridor, there were regularly mosaic floors welcoming the visitor, or sometimes not so welcoming the visitor. So these are two mosaic floors from two of the entry corridors in Pompeian houses, and they show guard dogs of the sort that you should beware, as this mosaic makes explicit, just in case the teeth, the claws, the size, and the leash didn't warn you. It tells you here, cave canem, beware of the dog. Yes.
Those spaces you don't have highlighted, like in front of the green, are those like shops?
Yes, they are shops. The shops, very good. The shops, as you can see, open directly onto the street. Sometimes the shops are run by the people who live in the houses, in which case, as here, for example, there's a way to get in and out from the house. But sometimes it's just an area that's leased. So this is a very nice corner unit. It had openings on both streets, although the larger opening was on this one. But it's not associated with the people who live in this house, nor is that one. So that's where the shops are. There's not a kind of shopping district. The shops were right along. The houses and the shops were all together, kind of the way that St. Paul, Minneapolis, a lot of houses and stores were in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and I think even the 60s. An ancient Latin writer, Columella, discusses the characteristics of the best sort of guard dog. He says that the best sort of guard dog has an ample bulk, is squarely built so that he's very strong, has a loud bark, and preferably is black so that in the daytime he's more scary and in the night he's harder to see. So these two dogs fit that description. After you enter through the entryway of a Roman house, you come into this open central space. There is a pool, a small pool, or a sunken area in the floor, and an opening in the roof. The pool is called an impluvium, and the opening of the roof is called the compluvium. And you can see that all of the all of these houses have this. In its entirety, this setup, this sort of this area that you enter directly into from the foyer is called an atrium. Atrium. The atrium is the place where the impluvium and the compluvium are, and this style of house, this Italic style of house, is called an atrium house. You might be wondering about that compluvium. Like, wouldn't it let in water? And the answer is yes, it would. So, in addition to getting light and air through the compluvium, you would also get a little liquid refreshment periodically, and that's why the impluvium is sunken down into the floor. Inside atrium houses in Italy, usually directly off of the atrium, but sometimes in a different area of the house, is a small shrine. You recall there is only 3% of the town's land devoted to temples, but every house had, or almost every house had, a setup for uh, the household gods to be able to give an offering to them on a daily basis. The household gods in Latin are the lares, Lares, and so the shrine is called the lararium. And here you see two of them in two different houses. Is this still the Hellenistic period? The houses Pompeii is third, second, first centuries BCE and first century CE up until August 24th, 79. And in it is the same time. Most of that is the same time period as the Hellenistic period, but in Italy, this is still the period of the Republic. That is, it will be until we get to Augustus next Thursday. So Hellenistic is really for the Eastern Mediterranean, and in Italy we call it the Republic, but the centuries are the same. Every atrium house had a kind of reception room or meeting room where guests would come in. It was almost always directly located off of the atrium, off of the impluvium area. When you walk in, is frequently lined up with the entryway, but not always. And you see here one of those tablinums uh, in a Pompeian house behind the opening of the impluvium. It could be for dining, but it wasn't actually explicitly for that. It was really it was like the formal sitting room or the formal living room of a house. This is a feature that Greek houses don't don't have, this kind of separate formal greeting room. It's the equivalent in essence of what the houses used to have that would be called a parlor. The these main rooms and most of the rooms of Pompeian houses had wall decoration. Almost all the walls were painted. Floors had mosaic, and walls had wall decoration. And you see this wall decoration in one of these Pompeian houses, the so-called House of Sallust. You see, like on Delos and like at Tel Anafa, these big panels of painted color imitating stone veneer. As time went on, people got tired of this as a style of wall painting. There's one thing about style: it must change. If it doesn't change, it's not style. So wall painting styles changed. In the first century BCE, this kind of wall painting style, which was more common a little bit earlier, uh, was replaced by a kind of wall painting style where the wall was painted as if there were a whole series of vistas and different architectural units and receding planes that you could enter from one space into another. And so this is a flat wall from a villa at the site of Bosco Reale, which is not too far from Pompeii. And you see plane one with this jutting out pedestal on which these columns are, and then sort of niche behind that, and then the niche opens up to an apsidal entry, and behind the apsidal entry, there's painted a portico, and there's a statue in the portico, and then there's some structures behind that, and then the sky behind that. So a whole series of receding landscapes because the houses were kind of dark. The rooms were kind of dark, and in this way, you would have a sense of vistas, one opening out onto another. The original style of painting walls in these flat sort of colored panels, the Romans pick up from the Greeks. They borrow this from the Greeks. But this kind of elaborated architectural style they develop on their own. In Pompeii, and you'll see in your reading, these various painting styles have been given, scholars have given them names. So this being the earliest of the styles is called by scholars who work in Italy and in Pompeii the first Pompeian style. And this architectural version is called the second Pompeian style. That sense of vista that is granted by the paintings is provided in real life by another part of the house, moving from usually the tablinum, although there are other ways to get into it, into the backyard of a Pompeian house, because almost every single house at Pompeii had a backyard and a garden. In fact, 23% of all the space at Pompeii was devoted to gardens. That includes gardens inside houses, yards, and commercial gardens, because there were in the town large open areas of commercial gardens where people worked. So you see an aerial view here of a small house, and in the small house there is a garden, and likewise here, here, and here. Sometimes, especially in older style houses, the garden is just a little room off the back, smaller or larger, but sometimes it's like this. What's this? It's peristyle court. It's peristyle court, which is a nouveau form of garden that the Romans, the Pompeians, borrow from the Greek world. Peristyle courts start to show up in Pompeian houses in the first century BCE. They probably, people saw them. Remember all those Italian businessmen at Delos, and people there had houses with peristyle courtyards. And when those folks, some of them came back to home, they brought the idea with them and expanded the houses frequently to insert a peristyle court in the backyard in the garden. So the gardens are a huge feature of Pompeian houses, which are is one of the things that really sets Italian houses and Roman houses, and especially houses in Pompeii apart from Greek houses where you don't have you don't have yards and you don't have gardens. Here is the backyard of in the peristyle court, actually, of one of these houses in Pompeii, the house of the Veti, and you see that the house is the garden is planted. That garden is planted just for fun by the Italian Antiquities folks, the Soprintendenza of Pompeii. But many of the gardens of Pompeii could be replanted in the way that they were planted in the past because one great, fantastic archaeologist named Wilhelmina Jastrzębski, from whom you have an article in your course pack, long ago, she was working at Pompeii when she was starting out as an archaeologist, and she observed all of these backyards with gardens such as this that you see here, and there were raised beds along the side. And before I go on, I just need to point out this is not actually your imagination. This is a painting on the wall of the garden of a little fountain because in these outside gardens there were paintings on the walls that made the garden seem even larger and sometimes had accoutrement like fountains that if somebody couldn't afford a real fountain, well, then they painted one on the wall. She saw all these places where Pompeians had clearly enjoyed the outdoors, these gardens, and she figured out how to excavate in the gardens in order to understand what had been planted there. So you're looking here at one of these excavation sites. This is the backyard of a Pompeian house, and you see a raised bed. Inside any of these gardens, you would be able to make out if you were excavating small dark areas, a different color than the surrounding soil. Those dark areas were filled with lapilli, the small pumice stones that came out from the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. When Vesuvius erupted and fires broke out, the first things that burned in a lot of the houses were the plants in the garden. They burned up and out, leaving the root cavities open. The root cavities then were hollow. And when the lapilli came in, they filled up the root cavities. So you pry out the lapilli with, this is a sophisticated archaeological tool here, it's a stick. You pry out the lapilli, and then once they're all completely out, you have the negative impression of the roots. You pour plaster into the cleaned out negative impressions, and then you wait for it to dry. And after the plaster has dried, you excavate away the dirt that's around the dried plaster. And then you have the um, cast of the root structure of the plant that had been planted there. Like fingerprints, roots are individual. Different plants have different sorts of roots. And then she was able to figure out what sorts of plants were found in each of these various gardens. So here again is the house of the Vecchi, and this has low shrubs, but in lots of these gardens there were higher shrubs and fruit-bearing trees and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Wouldn't you only be able to use that method that Old Sardis Neglector has for like shrubs and trees? Wouldn't the roots of small flowers and plants be the best method?
Yes, it's shrubs and trees that she was able to locate, and it's shrubs and trees that were regularly in these gardens.
Oh, were there not a lot of flowers then?
Well,
That's what I assumed.
Uh, in addition to actual gardens, which were such a common part of Pompeian houses, most houses, or lots of houses, had paintings on the walls of the gardens to extend the atmosphere. Um, the house of Bracciodoro has this wonderful display of plants, and it's inhabited with birds and um, all sorts of wildlife populating the garden. Yeah.
Are those people drawn on the top there?
Yes, they are. They're little sort of medallion plaques that are drawn at the top. Yep. Probably the well, actually, I can't really. I was going to say probably the owner of the house, but they could be deities. I don't remember, and I can't really tell. But yeah, that's what they are. Yeah.
Did they paint plants that they would have had there, or did they like paint artwork?
They painted plants that they had.
So could you use that to kind of get an idea of like the small flowers that aren't too big?
Well, you could. We. The, when I say they painted plants that they painted plants that still today grow around here. Ferns and marigolds and grapes. Grape leaves are common. Um, so I think we just figured that since those are what grows there today, and those are what we see on the paintings, it's likely that in a lot of the gardens they had vegetation like this. It seems to be, in other words, the paintings are very realistic. They aren't overly fanciful. You don't see impossible um, assemblages of vegetation. The plant like these little daisies and um, pansies are all straightforward kinds of plants that you can imagine growing in a garden. In the gardens were sculpture. And I say sculpture in quotation marks, thinking about those sorts of little those little figures that people used to have sometimes on their front lawns. Um, Various kinds of ornaments. Well, ornaments. That's a better word for it. Garden ornaments is not necessarily garden sculpture. Um, there were clearly some subjects that were more popular, and so we find repeated examples of certain types. A favorite was Venus, the Roman deity Venus, the Greek Aphrodite, in either complete undress or partial undress. Um, Getting wet, like pouring water over her hair here. And sometimes there were very small variations of the most popular statues. So this statue of Venus taking off her sandal, this is the same statue. But what's different is the prop that the sculptor has used. So you can imagine going into the shop and there would be a whole bunch of these all in one place. And so the prop on this Venus is a stayed representation of a female deity, a sort of old style statue of a female deity, looking very stiff and facing the other way. But the prop in this version is a male deity without any clothes on, looking directly at Venus. In fact, looking directly at her chest, as is his position. So um, these are just two different variations of the same thing. Yeah.
Do we see shops of statues?
Well, I don't.
Or do they like work on commission, you think, or do you know anything about that?
There are a lot of shops, but I don't actually know if a statue shop has been found at Pompeii. I'm not a Pompeii specialist, so a statue shop could have been found and I wouldn't know about it. But I don't know of one. I mean, yeah, I don't know of one. But there must have been. Uh,
Well, clearly they could buy them. I was just wondering if they were like more work on commission, or if it was a shop. I was just curious.
yeah. That kind of doubt these were commissioned just because there are tons of garden sculpture. So much that it seems that it was more something that people could just go and buy because it's so common. Something else in the gardens, a little more homier, um, dog houses. So we saw the image of the dog in the foyer. So that's where the dogs could be portrayed, but then they had to live someplace, and frequently, like today, they had a house back in the garden. So here's one propped up against a wall, and this is a drawing of another. It's a piece of terracotta pipe that was just put up on a few bricks to give the dog some shelter. Other things found in the gardens by excavators: tools, hose, and rakes, and the debris from dining, food, bones. Um, this is a fish hook and shells and bones from animals, so people weren't exactly super neat, and maybe they were using it as uh, you know, something towards compost for the gardens. So here is an outdoor dining place in um, in a private garden in Pompeii, and you see the setup here of the dining couches. There is one, two, three dining couches. Unlike the dining couches in the Androns, the dining rooms at Olympus, more than one person sat on a couch. So you had a few people leaning against one another on each of these couches. Because there are three couches, this style of dining room, which is typical of a Roman house, is called a triclinium. A triclinium is a kind of dining setup with three couches, triclini. Triclinium, triclinium. What is the most significant difference between a triclinium and an andron? The most significant difference between a triclinium and an andron. What do you think? There could be a head of the table. There could be a head of the table. Not only could there be a head of the table, there actually had to be a head of the table. A dining setup that requires hierarchy. Here's a wall painting that shows diners in a triclinium. Here's couch one, here's couch two, and here's couch three. These tiny little figures here are the servants who are able to access everything by coming up into the middle of the setup. And so you see three people seated along this side, and you see indisputably the head of the table here. An interest in hierarchy that we did not see institutionalized in the Greek andron. Those pans, those that we saw an example of from Tel and representation of at from I mean a photo of one from Pompeii, have been found at Pompeii with bread inside them. So obviously they were pretty good for bread, and the kind of bread that was found inside the pans is the sort that was sold by vendors in street carts, and you see a painting from Pompeii showing some of that bread piled up, that exact same kind of bread as was found at the site, piled up here from the owner. And here's that vessel itself, the pan from which the in which the bread was made, um, and a reminder of the one from Tel Anapa. So there were vendors, and then there were shops, lots of shops, and this is one such, and there were openings here in the front counter so that people could get soup or wine. And but this is a shop that was actually a bakery, and here's the sign for the shop, on the that hung outside, and it depicts a mill, an ancient mill. And here is the backyard of this shop, and you can see that there are a whole series of these sorts of mills in the back, along with a great big oven. Here's how it worked: you had grain, and you poured it into the top part of this mill, and there were, as you can see in the depiction here, there were um, there were wooden posts or poles that came out the holes on these sides, and that allowed this upper piece to turn. And as it turned, the grain that was put into the top here was crushed against the inside of this upper piece and the outside of this lower piece. The shape of the lower piece goes like this. So this cone fits on top. And as the grain was ground in this area between these two pieces, it would come, it would flow out the opening at the bottom here, and you would have some kind of um, draped over this, some kind of cloth, and that would catch all of the grain, and that is how you would have the um, the grain ground into flour that you would then use for baking. So this is the exterior, or this is the back of this shop, and the shop is attached to a house, a typical atrium house, and inside this atrium house was a portrait painting on the wall immediately in front, when you would walk in to the atrium of the house, that you would see of the owner of the bakery and his wife. Oops. And here they are. He's holding a papyrus roll. She's holding a stylus and a wax tablet, which was a common surface on which people wrote. You can write a message, and then you can erase it, and you can write something else. They are very serious. They are looking straight out at you, at the viewer, and they are representing themselves in the very best light, in uh, in their fine dress, with her hair all done up in ringlets and earrings, with her jewelry. They are average Pompeian middle class couple, hard working, regular folks, not particularly elite. You may recall Cleopatra and Dioscorides from Delos, and the kind of overblown majesty of their larger than life marble sculptures. The whole idea of having an individual portrait was 400 years before this, in the time of Alexander the Great, something reserved only for kings. primacy of these individuals in their daily lives has come to the fore. And that the best place that we can see that societal development is in their houses. I'm done. That's it. You guys go home, have a good weekend, and come talk to either Dan or me if you've got questions about your papers.